To our Parenting in the Midst of Anxiety seminar for this afternoon. So we are so privileged to invite Pastor Daron to be with us today. And we all know Daron has been with us before, and a lot of people know him as a balloon man, and he's very creative and very close to the kids, and all the kids love him. But today is very special because the session is not for kids, it's for parents. So we're going to give the time to Pastor Daron, so I won't occupy too much time. We're going to have about 1 hour section first and have a break. So before we finish, we'll pass some Q&A paper, so you can drop down your questions and we can collect the questions, and Pastor Daron will try to answer the questions as much as he can, and we will have a short break and then we'll continue the second section. Does that sound right? And let's do a prayer quickly before we get started. Okay, our Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us this opportunity to learn together. May God give us wisdom so we know how to be a good parent. We all know children is the asset from God, from heaven, but sometimes as parents, a lot of us are our first time being parents. We don't know how to handle these special gifts, and every kids are so special, so unique, and we really need your wisdom and your passion, your love to be with us. So Lord, please guide Pastor Daron so he can also guide us through, so we know what we are doing, so we can be closer to you. And we're going to give this time to you, Lord, so please be with us so we can really get the most out of it. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
So, straight up. Yes, working. Good afternoon. It is good to be with you, and we're going to have a bit of a journey the next few weeks as we journey together, looking at different ways and what it means to parent our children well. And I think I'm preaching on Father's Day. I've got a very special Father's Day sermon organised, so any fathers that you know need to be invited that day, bring them along on what it means to be a good father, and the impact that good fathering has on our children as well. So that's going to be a sermon. And the last week, we've talked about the idea of it being everyone together with our children. I'm going to be twisting balloons as well as presenting, which is going to be an interesting presentation for both adults and children together as a way to finish off. But today we're looking at anxiety, depression, and mental health. And I guess what qualifies me for this? Well, I have been working in family ministries and children's ministries for the past 20 plus years. But most qualification for me is being a parent. I now have 2 young adult children, Andrew, my son, and Madison, and now a grandfather of Luca, who is just turned 2, and having a daughter who still suffers from high anxiety really drove me to research this topic, to think about this topic and look at the idea of anxiety, mental health, and how I can be a better dad to my daughter and support her through all of that. She's now living in the UK, where I've just come home from this last week on Thursday. So if I do look a bit sleepy towards the end of the session, you know that I'm on London time still and adjusting. But yeah, I performed the wedding for my daughter, and the fact that she's now living outside the world on her own, I think proves what an independent person she has become. I raised her to be independent, not quite that independent to live so far away, but I'm very proud of her. So I guess that's my background in what it means to parent in the midst of anxiety today. Now, there will be questionnaire cards coming around where you can write down your questions. So I can either answer those today, or if I can't answer, I will answer it next time I'm here. If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer out for you, because I'm in contact with a lot of good experts I can talk to about these topics as well. So let's get into it. New research from the National Youth Mental Health Foundation, Headspace, reveals 8 out of 10 Australians are worried about the mental health of young people in their lives. That was just Headspace report last week. Almost everyone in Australia, and probably indeed across the world, is talking about mental health, particularly anxiety when it comes to our children. What this research shows is that families are paying attention to the young people in their lives, and that they understand that it's never been more difficult to navigate adolescence and early adulthood than it is today. Many young people are having a tough time, and it's very normal for their loved ones to be concerned about them, as I am as a dad and a parent. Young Australians are not thriving, they're just surviving today. Our Australian Youth Barometer report reveals a staggering 98% report feeling anxious or pessimistic. And this is a crisis that we can't ignore. According to Dr. Kwan from Monash University, he says that almost all Australian children are feeling some form of anxiety today. This book came across my desk just last year. It's a bestseller by Jonathan Haidt. He's written a lot of podcasts. He's one of the best known speakers at the moment on this topic. And he wrote this book called The Anxious Generation. And what he shows, you can almost pinpoint the very date around the year 2012 where anxiety and psychological distress went off the chart. More for our girls than for our boys. You can see there was a 74% increase since the year 2010 of psychological distress in our girls, and a 55% increase for our boys. That's those aged 16 to 24. And he asked the question, what is this all about? And his premise is, he says, my central claim in this book he wrote is these two trends. It says overprotection in the real world, stranger danger, wanting to keep our kids safe and make sure that they're happy, and underprotection in the virtual world. He says that the major reasons why children born after 1995 up until today have become known as the anxious generation. Want to know more about that? I'm talking about this book in more detail. I think it's about session 3 or 4 where I'll look at this in more detail about what Jonathan Haidt is actually talking about and what we can do about that. But the questions ask what causes anxiety in children and teens. And the answer is that some kids are naturally sensitive and may have a hard time coping with change or strong emotions. These kids may have a biological or family tendency to be anxious. Anxiousness can also develop after stressful life events. And some people have many stressful events from a very early age, like these things. The death of someone close to them. Moving to a new house or school, especially if these moves are frequent. Difficulty with getting enough to eat. Difficulty with safe places to live. Difficulty with consistent schooling. Parents who fight or argue, or separation and divorce. Bullying, abuse or neglect. All create anxiety in our children. But as it says, sometimes we're just born with an anxious tendency. And I think it is hereditary. I tend to be anxious at times, and some days I wake up and there's no reason why. You just feel anxious. And so I think my daughter comes by it honestly, in that she's a very anxious, clingy person as well. I remember sometimes when she'll just, especially in crowded situations, be clinging onto my arm and almost digging her nails in. That's how anxious she was, and she was very much wanting Dad to be there or Mum to be there, not let them go, separation anxiety, anxious about failing tests. She would always say when she came home, I failed that one. She always passed. But she had a high anxiety about achieving, about passing, and about doing new things. And so that really drove me to the research as a dad as to how to be a better parent. What increases the risk of child anxiety disorder? a toddler whose temperament is shy, having a parent who is anxious, as her father is, my daughter's father, yours truly, abuse of some form, other stressful traumatic life events, bullying and victimisation, chronic illness, excessive screen time, drug use, issues with gender identity, and other mental health issues or developmental issues, depression, ADHD, ASD, or conduct disorder. There seems to be a different diagnosis happening all the time. And this came out of the book called by Dr. Norman Swan, who's an Australian paediatrician, on what's good for your kids, that came out last year and still about in our bookstores. And what he was saying is that we can't stop some of these things from happening to our children. We can't wrap our kids up in cotton wool and protect them from all these things, much as they would like to. In fact, wrapping our kids up in cotton wool can make them even more anxious and cause more mental health issues in the long run. So what do we do as parents to parent our children in the midst of anxiety? It's interesting that this book from Headspace research looked at young people think social media is the main reason that mental health is getting worse. And when you look at what Jonathan Haidt's talking about, it's about the year 2010 when social media and front-facing cameras on our phones, the word selfie gets invented, and that's about the same time when mental health issues, especially for our girls, begins to increase. But young people themselves put social media as the top of the cause of anxiety. Expectation from family and school and community, work and study pressure, political, social, environmental issues, bullying, information technology for gaming and the internet, interpersonal problems, stigma around mental illness, drugs and alcohol. But as you can see, social media is the number one factor that kids themselves write down as the cause of mental health issues, in particular anxiety. So what is anxiety? Dr. Joe Prendergast says anxiety is when we have worry, thinking about bad things happening in the future or that things that may happen, and fear, and how we physically felt when we think something bad is about to happen to us. It's an overwhelming sense of dread that something bad is about to happen. Some anxiety is helpful, but it becomes unhelpful when there is too much of it at the wrong time. When the fear and worry get bigger than the situation requires, or it feels life-threatening when it actually isn't. And the idea to catastrophise, to think of the worst case scenarios, is often what begins to spiral anxiety out of control. Some anxiety, as Dr. Joe says, is good. We all experience anxiety at times. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a normal part of life, is to feel anxious at times. But if it is ongoing, if it is life-crippling and affects our ability to eat, our ability to function, our ability to go to school, our ability to mix in society, then we begin to, as a parent, get worried and begin to seek help as to how we can help our children through this and give them some sort of a sense of coping with it. Jennifer Margaret from Johns Hopkins Medicine says, what is the difference between anxiety and normal stress? Most normal anxiety and stress goes away quickly, maybe in a day or a few hours. Anxiety becomes an increasing concern when anxious feelings are very intense and go on for weeks, months, or even longer, and or get in the way of the teenager's ability to learn, engage in home, school or work environments, and enjoy daily life. And one thing to teach our kids is to recognise anxiety, to acknowledge what it is, and then to learn strategies of how to survive and get by in their day. And as someone that suffers anxiety, I've had to teach myself, number one, why am I feeling anxious? Or acknowledge that I am feeling anxious. Often there's not a why. But then to know what the go-to strategies are to bring that anxiety down and get myself back to a functioning level. And I'll talk about some of those and what they are in a moment as to some strategies to help our children reduce anxiety back to a normal level. So what are the signs, symptoms of anxiety in children and teens? Worries, they worry a lot. They feel irritable or nervous, feeling restless. They're wound up, they're on edge, they're easily fatigued. When you see these symptoms in your children, you know that anxiety is probably the cause. They won't say they're anxious, they don't know what it is, they just have these feelings. And we as a parent need to pick that they're feeling anxious, and that's what it is, and then to work with that. Other symptoms are difficulty concentrating, sleep problems, muscle tension, headaches. The big one for my daughter was stomach aches. When she said she had a stomach ache, I was often, okay, anxiety is there. And then working out what was causing the anxiety with her for that day and then working with her to help bring that anxiety down. And also even feeling pain as well is some of the symptoms that our children and even us as adults can think. So what can parents do? These are things that from my reading, from my research, but also from suffering anxiety and having a highly anxious daughter, and to some extent a son as well, these are things that I've found work. You can take it or leave it. You might have another idea you can add to it, but see what you think of these tips that I've come up with. Number one, always keep the big picture in mind. Anxiety is unpredictable and can show up at the most inconvenient times, especially when you as a parent are busy, you have big things happening, and often that is the moment when your child suddenly shows up, or it's on the way to school, you're about to drop them off, you've got to get to your work and do your appointments. Oh, what do I do? Your child is flipping out. Keep the big picture in mind. When it comes to parenting an anxious child, they need your full attention during the anxious times. This is where my wife and I would do what we call tag parenting. We'd have that discussion, okay, Madison's feeling anxious today, which one of us can be there to work through this with her, and we'll tag team on that and work out who was in the best position to be there. Maybe it couldn't happen that day, but that evening when they're home from school, I'll make sure that I arrive home early or pick her up from school, whatever it took, to be there and to be in her picture. Here's what Anxious Kids, a book that I was reading just recently, says about what it means to turn up for your child. It's called SOBER. Stop, observe, breathe, expand, respond. SOBER means stop. Give your child your full attention as soon as you are able. A highly anxious child is a call for attention, and so as soon as I'm able to, in the business of life, I'll make sure that I'm there to stop and get into my child's picture. Observe is the O of SOBER. Observe, what is your child doing? What is their behaviour telling you? Be compassionate and patient with yourself, number one, but also with your child. they're feeling anxious. We need to find what we can do to bring the anxiety down, not to make it worse sometimes. And that takes patience, that takes compassion, and it takes listening as well, as your child begins to talk and share what's going on in their life, and to look for those clues of what's going on. B stands for breathe. Take a moment to breathe deeply and slowly settles your own stress and anxiety in the moment, and by them mirroring you may help de-escalate theirs. And I'll talk about breathing shortly. There's a whole lot of information around breathing, and sometimes just encouraging your child to take a deep breath and to breathe with you 2 or 3 times. Breathe in, hold it, and breathe out again. Helps to reset, helps to de-escalate, and often helps them to be able to begin to talk and calm down as well. So you're breathing, number one, and get them to copy you if need be, to help get them breathing and talking again. E stands for expand. Look at where are you, what's happening next, both in your schedule and also in the family schedule, in your child's schedule, and what are your options to parent in this moment. So that's where you look at what the options are and how you can be there with your child. And R stands for respond. Try and make your first sentence to your child one of valuation, which is, I get it. Things like, I can see you're feeling anxious about. They might not know what it is, but you can use the I can see and that begin to help them to think. Or use the words, I hear you. The fact that you value them and you use the terms, I see you, I hear you, I can see your feeling, I'm there for you, reassures the child that you're there for them. You may not understand why they're feeling anxious at that point, but they know that you are showing up. Number 2, I'd like to look at, this is the number 2, tips of helping your child with anxiety, is the power of showing up. There's a book written about this by Daniel Segal and Tina Payne Bryson, and they've said one of the very best scientific predictors for how any child turns out in terms of happiness, academic success, leadership skills, and meaningful relationships is whether at least one adult in their life has consistently shown up for them. Showing up means that I put everything down. It means I even turn this to airplane mode and put it to one side, face down. We often get distracted by this, and if I want my daughter and my son to know I'm there for them and want me to show up, then putting that down, number 1, models that I'm there, I'm in their picture, and I want to listen. So put down your technology and be there for them. But this book is worth getting and reading on the fact that at least one parent that shows up has all sorts of long-term outcomes for our children. And that might mean even when I get a little certificate at assembly at school, then as a dad I would stop everything if I could to turn up to that assembly and show up and cheer my children on. Knowing that you are there for them no matter what does a lot to reduce their anxiety. Interesting that the parenting handbook says it is in the moments of connection when children feel, and this is key, feel seen, thank you, feel seen, heard, valued and loved, that they feel like they can move mountains. And that's what I want my children to feel like they can do, to feel like they can do it all, that they can move mountains, that they can make a big difference, that this is possible despite their anxiety. And it's simply connection, feeling seen, heard and valued that makes all the difference. And too often, this busy life makes us busy. And the Sydney rat race makes us busy. Even for me, leaving Warringah this morning to get across here this afternoon, it's like, this is just chaos with traffic, and it's like Saturday traffic and it's still bumper to bumper and backed up through the tunnel, and I'm starting to panic, and I've got to remember to stop, to breathe and to slow down. But especially for our children, to slow down, to show up and to be there for them. This book also I read recently called Being Seen, and it says the love, care and connection we give and share with our children is like a protective shield guarding their brain from negative influences and paving the way for resilience. Neural connections shape the child's belief about themselves. And it says we are the key role models for our children. Showing up and being there for them is a huge way to show up and to help our children with their anxiety. Number 3, stop and take a deep breath. Talked about that earlier, but this is in more detail what it means. When you take in a deep breath, your body takes in a full breath of oxygen in exchange for the carbon dioxide you're breathing out. Studies have suggested, according to Headspace, that slow, deep breathing was associated with stress reduction for people managing many problems, including anxiety. And so often in the busyness of what we're doing, we shallow breathe rather than deep breathe. And consciously pausing and taking those 3 or 4 deep breaths can make all the difference, especially when it comes to anxiety. Almost immediately after starting deep breathing, you may notice your heart rate and blood pressure drop. In time, you may have increased feelings of calm, well-being, reduced levels of stress hormones in your blood, improved immune system functioning, increased physical energy, more balanced oxygen and carbon dioxide in your blood, less lactic acid build-up in your muscles, all from stopping and taking a few deep breaths. And for your anxious child, teaching them the art of good breathing, deep breathing, pausing and breathing can be the on and off switch for their feelings of anxiety. And this especially works with my daughter. And I encourage her to stop and to breathe deeply. Number 4, get a hobby. Take some time out or practice what is called mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness hobbies has been shown to significantly reduce anxiety in adolescents and in adults by up to 38%. It does this by increasing activity in the part of the brain that processes cognitive and emotional information and the part of the brain that controls worrying. For me, it's going home, and those that know Pastor Daron, you know that I breed show poultry. I keep chickens and ducks and breed them and rear them and grow them and prepare them for show. I belong to the local poultry club, and taking the time out to practice a hobby with like-minded people, as I said there, reduce anxiety rate up to 38%. It may not be chickens. It could be running. My son loves running. It could be an athletics club. It could be a walking club, a nature club, a camera club. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's just taking the time out to do a hobby makes all the difference. Things like painting, cooking, drawing, doodling and scribbling, making collages, working with clay, playing a musical instrument, gardening, sewing and textile art, sport, or even just doing chores. Getting our children involved in a hobby, and often it starts by doing it alongside or with them, helps them to learn to take time out and manage their anxiety. Breathing and exercises and hobbies also help stimulate the vagus nerve, which is interesting research in itself. Has just become more understood recently. Working on keeping your vagus nerve happy will help you respond more effectively to emotional and psychic stresses in your life and reduce anxiety. Susanna Hanneken, who's a clinical trauma professional, said, "I have witnessed a positive impact on panic attacks, grief, anxiety, depression, depersonalisation, sleeping disturbances, porous boundaries and much more, just by exercising the vagus nerve." Daron Morton from our own Avondale University has done some research on this. He says the vagus system acts to counterbalance the fight or flight system and can trigger a relaxation response in our body. It is one of the cranial nerves that connect the brain to the body. The vagus nerve is a major part of how our bodies and brains function. Without it, our bodies wouldn't be able to do basic tasks, and by stimulating it, we can receive powerful health benefits. So how do we stimulate the vagus nerve? It says loud gargling with water or loud singing activities. Activate our vocal cords. So singing in the shower is good for you. Or gargling water, which in turn stimulates the vagus nerve. We can teach our kids to do these things. Foot massage, gentle or firm touch, can assist in stimulation of the vagus nerve. Cold water face immersion. Immerse your forehead, eyes, and at least 2/3 of both cheeks into cold water. This elicits the vagus nerve, decreasing the heart rate, stimulating the intestines, and turns on the immune system. Simply by helping this happen. My wife says that at school, when she has kids who are suffering panic attacks or anxiety, just a cold cloth around the back of their neck and getting to stop and breathe helps to open up the vagus nerve, and it's a miracle in what it does to calm the children down. Eating fibre stimulates vagus impulses to the brain, slowing the gut movements, makes us feel fuller after meals. Laughter, having a good laugh, lifts your mood, boosts your immune system, and stimulates the vagus nerve. Number 6, This one I found works especially well for my daughter, reading or reading story for pleasure. We discovered, according to the University of Cambridge, that reading for pleasure in earlier childhood was linked with better scores on comprehensive cognition assessments and better educational attainment in young adolescents. It was also associated with fewer mental health problems and less time spent on electronic devices. So teach your children to love reading from a young age. That comes from reading to them from a very young age and telling stories, but also encouraging them to go and visit bookstores. For me, going to the city, it's not a trip to the city without visiting Kinnikinnia, above the town hall station, or Angus and Robertson just around the corner. And the best day is when I get to visit both. But here's the thing. The best days my daughter can remember, and the happiest days for her, is when she was able to come with me and visit both. And I didn't mind spending the money on a few good books, encourage her to read, and also helping to bring that anxiety down. And now the research proves it. Number 7, exercise. People with anxiety tend to be more sedentary and do less intense forms of physical activity, if any. How does exercise help anxiety? Engaging in exercise diverts you from the very thing you are anxious about. It's like a reset. Moving your body decreases muscle tension, lowering the body's contribution to feeling anxious. It also gets your heart rate up, changing the brain chemistry, increasing the availability of important anti-anxiety neurochemicals, including serotonin, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is GABA. So getting your children out exercising, getting with you, or encouraging them involved in a sport or involved in some form of exercise is another natural way to help bring that anxiety down. Exercise activates frontal regions of the brain responsible for executive function, which helps control the amygdala, our reacting system to real or imagined threats to our survival. Often when there's a panic attack or anxiety, our brain or our kid's brain flips out. Exercising helps for the brain to calm down and to function once again. Builds up resources that bolster resilience against stormy emotions. Number 8, minimise distractions. The research proves a strong correlation between smartphones becoming our everyday tools and mental health diagnosis rising. The research shows that girls are particularly susceptible to the negative impacts of social media. I'm glad that Australia is bringing in laws that are coming into effect shortly that will help us parent better. Will our kids find their way around it? Probably. They're good at that. But at least we as parents can say, the government says so, and so do we. You're not allowed on social media until the age of 16. This at least gets our children through puberty, allowing the brain to wire correctly before the pressures of social media, especially for our girls, kicks in. Research also shows that teens meeting up in person with their friends only once a month or less due to the rise of devices face-to-face interactions are still important. And encourage that to happen in our kids helps reduce anxiety as well. The research shows that girls are particularly susceptible to the negative impacts of social media, and we need to do all we can to help our kids negotiate that by putting in place guardrails. For example, no phones in bedroom and no mobile phone use an hour before bed or an hour after wakening. No phones or devices at mealtimes. No mobile phone use before school, during school. Thankfully, most schools now, New South Wales, are phone-free, or when completing homework. And no devices during family time. Having those rules in place is going to help your children to cope better with life and especially with their mental health, particularly around anxiety and depression. Number 9, get plenty of sleep. Our children still need on average 6 and particularly more likely 8 hours of sleep a night, as do we. And there's a whole lot of study around sleep now. Sleep is the number one thing anyone can do to improve their brain health and overall health. This includes establishing consistent sleep routines, helping our children develop that, creating a calming sleeping environment, limiting screen time before bed, ensuring our children are getting enough sleep for their age and development. As I said, for an average child, even our teens, 6 to 8 hours minimum of uninterrupted time, which is why having mobile devices out of the bedrooms helps for a better sleep. Number 10, eat well. Breakfast that includes some protein. Eat complex carbohydrates. Drink plenty of water. Limit or avoid alcohol. In our case, we say no alcohol. Limit or avoid caffeine. Pay attention to food sensitivities and try to eat healthy and balanced meals. All help with mental health and anxiety. Number 11, independent free play. A biggest issue in today's society is that often the screen and keeping our kids indoors for their own protection has affected their ability for independent free play. Investing in children's play is one of the most important things we can do to improve children's health and well-being. That's according to Sir Harry Burns, Chief Medical Officer for Scotland. As I said, I've just returned from Scotland and the UK, having visited both and retracing some of my roots. A couple of things I noticed over there in the UK. Number 1 was lots of vaping and smoking. It's on the streets. You notice it when in Australia we're basically smoke-free and vape-free. But number 2 was a positive. In most of the parks and commons and public spaces, they are bringing back free play for our children. They're allowing the bush to regrow in some of the commons to encourage insects. But also, when a tree falls, they don't cut it up. They leave it there. And so he goes through the parks, went through Hyde Park, went through Kensington Palace Gardens, but also right through Scotland and right through the UK where we went. Every park had fallen trees that had been left there for the kids to play on. The playgrounds are more robust with merry-go-rounds and with pallets that have been dumped there. and bits and pieces of junk, that the kids can be inventive and play with on purpose. And I noticed, especially in the afternoon and evenings, families gathered in the parks, and the kids and adults played freely together. And there were no mobile phones. They may be in the pockets, but when families play together, or when children play together in intergenerational different age groups, it appears that resilience is increased, mental health is better. And I think that Britain is ahead of Australia with this free play movement. Professor Camilla Ortiz completed the first pilot project treating anxious kids with a mega dose of independence and free play. They walked to school, they ran errands, simple stuff. But this independence therapy worked better, according to this professor, than drugs and faster than cognitive behavioural therapy, which is normally being used to treat anxiety. When parents hover and prevent children from independently exploring the world around them, they foster many of the processes that scientists identified as causes of anxiety.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you're talking about independence, free time, the thing is, should it not be possible for the iPad? Because the school required the student bring the iPad to school. So should I have to give her the password? Not at home. As long as I give her independent time, we just use the iPad.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do.
And we need to really, as parents, fight hard to create this time for our children. As I said, life gets busy and screen time sucks up free play. I'll talk about more in one of our future sessions where that occurs. And also, as Jonathan Haidt says in his book, if we tell our kids to walk along the streets and go do an errand by themselves, often we'll get reported to human services for not parenting our children. We've created a world where we think children need to be supervised at all times. And it says that we need to collectively fight back against this. What I observed happening in the UK, yes, the parents were in the park. They actually had adult exercise equipment, like a gym in the park. But the parents were doing their thing and the kids were over, they were within eye distance, but they were involved in independent free play. And so creating ways where this can happen in a safe manner, I think is what this professor is talking about as the best step forward. Or even reclaiming the backyard. Getting our kids off screens and outdoors can make all the difference. What this professor says is kids who don't practice independence, yes, it's a skill that withers without practice, are less self-confident, have worse social skills, are less tolerant of uncertainty, have worse problem-solving skills, and are less resilient. One of the things we need to fight back about even for our education system is that often we're filling our school days up with where we need to teach them to read, teach them to do maths, and playtime, free playtime has become less and less and less over the years in an independent education system. And the Scandinavians and the Danish have happier kids, healthier kids, more mentally resilient kids, and one thing that they push hard against is making sure they have time for independent, free play at school and at home. And it's interesting to observe how Danish do their parenting. They overestimate danger, underestimate their own ability to handle problems, and catastrophize when things don't go as expected. This is when there's no free play. According to the professor, kids need lots of practice with what I call the 4 Ds. This is interesting. This is according to Professor Camillo Ortiz. Discomfort, distress, disappointment, and what he calls mild danger. When parents step in to save children from the 4 Ds, they inadvertently weaken children's ability to successfully navigate these integral parts of life. In contrast, independence and free play is a fantastic way for kids to get this practice, and without even realising it, inoculate themselves against anxiety. And that really spoke to me as a dad, especially in the younger years of my kids. When my kids would come to me and say, I'm bored, so that's good. My kids still today tease me about the fact that you'd say that's good, Dad, when we're bored. Because bored promotes free play, promotes creativity, and promotes a brain reset. So don't believe you have to entertain your kids all the time. Allow them to be bored, and when they come and say they're bored, say, that's good. Go find something to do. And that's where the free play begins to kick in. This one just again came back to me this week. I was reading a brand new book I picked up in the UK. Turn down the urban noise. Turn up green and blue time. This book I just got last week, and I read it on the plane coming home, The Brain at Rest. And it's based on Dr. Joseph Jabelli's he's a neuroscientist. This is his research. Persistent urban noise, he says, changes our brains. It hinders the production of new cells. It triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol, which then triggers neuroinflammation, neuronal dysfunction leading to memory loss and difficulties learning. Distracts us, making it hard to focus and retain information, and mentally exhausts us, instigating a cycle of anxiety and emotional turmoil. So, it says at least 1 million healthy life years are lost every year from traffic noise, according to the World Health Organization. With heart disease, high blood pressure, sleep disturbance, and cognitive impairment in children contributing to this figure. He says, you can even do this in the city, pick a spot that is free from urban sounds, cars, sirens, construction work, trains, television, and constant chatter, and full of natural sounds like birds, animals, sea, wind in trees, waves on the beach, where you can escape. This brings better cognitive focus. Even 10 to 20 minutes a day is enough, but 90 minutes is optimum, both for our children and for us. Research shows, according to Dr. Joe Prendergast, teens are 55% less likely to develop a mental illness if they grow up able to access green space with trees. Blue space, as in being near water, also has a similar effect. And number 12, restore connection. The loss of human connection, love and empathy is what ultimately is leading to a decline in our mental health. If you're depressed or if you're anxious, you're not weak, you're not crazy, you're not in the main a machine with broken parts. You are in the main a human being with unmet needs, and what you need is love and practical support to get those needs met. In Australian society where we're often pigeonholed and turned into production machines, encouraging connection is something that is the antidote to a lot of our anxieties we find ourselves in today. Number 13, service to others. Monash University research highlights a fascinating link between volunteering, anxiety and well-being. Young people today face unprecedented levels of political and social anxiety. What they've found is volunteering provides an outlet for these concerns, offering a constructive way to channel anxiety into positive action. Those who volunteer frequently report better mental health and higher life satisfaction. By volunteering, young people not only help others, but also improve their own mental well-being. The research shows that feel-good hormones and brain activity spike during volunteer activities. Humans are designed to be in community, serving one another. It's impossible not to impact a community when you volunteer. Just being there and doing whatever is needed is contributing to the greater whole. And that's where I think we as a church come into as well. We provide that community where volunteering and belonging to the greater whole can occur, which is what the last one I call is immersion in rich community. Jonathan Haidt says conservative teens report spending more time engaging in their local community, attending religious services, working, spending more time with trusted adults, and spending more time with their friends in person. Actually protects their mental health. The difference in how teens spend their time matters. Experts have extensively documented the mental health and social benefits of strong and stable real-world communities like churches, and unique contribution of religion in binding such communities together, partly due to the collective rituals that are key components of religious life. Real-world communities like churches help foster social trust, social capital and social support. Any developmental psychology textbook will tell you that healthy child development requires these features. So in conclusion, anxiety is a normal reaction to stress. Mild levels of anxiety can be beneficial in some situations, can alert us to dangers, helps prepare and pay attention. However, anxiety disorders differ from normal feelings of nervousness or anxiousness and involve excessive fear or anxiety. In the end, if in doubt, seek help. And I must have dropped off, but there are things like Beyond Blue, there's an Australian helpline for children, your school counsellor, your school chaplain, and wellbeing experts are generally a good first port of call. That concludes our first session on anxiety. Our second session after a break will move more into the mental health side of things in more detail, but let's take a break now. Thank you.
Thank you, Daron's wonderful sharing. We have a table of fruit and snacks outside for you to take a break. We're going to have just 15 minutes short break, so hopefully we can come back at 3 p.m, and we'll start the next section. On the snack table, we have some papers and pen there. If you have any questions, please fill it in and pass it to either me, Jenny, or Winnie. There's a box there. You can put it in the box so we can collect all the questions and then we can pass it to the pastor to answer your questions. Then let's have a quick break, toilet break and snacks break, and we'll come back to see you at 3 p.m. Thank you. Awake. Great. All right. So now we have a few questions has been handed in. So we're going to invite Pastor Daron to come up and explain to you a bit more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And two good questions, which sort of are related. First one was how to cut down screen time for my 15-year-old willingly. I will talk this more in detail in one coming up in a couple of weeks' time on the rewiring of our children's brain. But number one, I'd say we need to model what good screen time looks like. Often we, as dads, are the worst culprits, not putting down our phones when we should, at mealtimes and other places. So model what it means. Also, that connection with your child. When you take your child out on a hobby or do something together, where it's out exercise or nature or playing a board game of all things with them. There's a good board games around. When we are connecting with our children, they're less likely to be on screens. But number three, this is the hardest one. David Gillespie wrote the book Teen Brain, so that in Australia, we as parents just need to toughen up, especially when it comes to phones and technology and screens. Our children are attracted to it, and it will take their attention 24/7 if we allow it. When I talk about it in a few weeks' time, I'll talk about the fact that during their teen time, and 15-year-olds is exactly when it's happening, there are no breaks. They will stay on the screens 24/7 if we let them. So we as parents need to be the breaks and set the time. Even a timer, saying, okay, you have, and this is one I learned from a friend of mine recently who's got young kids at this very age. They have a time bank. At the start of the week, you have 15 hours to do whatever you want on screens. It's like a chess clock or a countdown clock. You can set these on your phones these days as well. And when that 15 hours is empty, your screen time's up. So you can either do the 15 hours in one day, or you can do it an hour a day or 2 hours a day. But when it runs out, you put your phone down. So teaching the kids, and 15-year-olds can do this, to self-regulate and saying, okay, you've got 15 hours in your bank. When it runs out, that's it for you. So spend it how you want. The first week or two, they'll spend it all in 1 day or 2 days, and they'll nag you, but say, hang on, no, there's a bank there. But then they'll learn how to regulate it. So you need to set those boundaries in place. I often do this when I give my kids a phone or when I upgrade their phone. Use an opportunity to sit down and renegotiate what screen time looks like. And I have to agree to it. As David Gillespie says, we are giving our kids literally a drug and are paying for that drug. So he says we need to parent in that space and limit what it means to be on those screens. And what the research is saying is that when our kids learn to self-limit, 98% of the time they'll put their phones down. And they teach them what it means to be that. Then how to get the kids to hand over their phones to you. That's an even harder one to answer, but basically, once again, as David Gillespie says, the Australian researcher and lawyer, remember that you are the parent. My kids knew, and they're now young adults, but the punishment was losing their devices for 24 hours. And I would take those devices in the car with me to work. Whatever it meant to say that, yep, you're losing your phone because you didn't hand it over, you're losing your phone for 24 hours. And they very quickly realised that when you say hand it over, you need to hand it over. But also be very, very particular about limiting the spaces where your kids can have the phone. So you have these sacred spaces in your house. Meal times, no phones for everyone. That includes me as a dad. Stack your phones up in the middle of the table for meals, like a table decoration. Stack them all up. And the rule in our household was whoever takes their phone first does the dishes. Now, often it ended up that I would do the dishes because I needed my phone for some reason, but as a dad I would do that because it modelled sacred time for our kids. No phones under any circumstances are in my kids' bedrooms. That's just a given right from the start. So you say, sorry, phones are not, and iPads are not in your bedroom. And I just make sure that's a known rule. Or bathrooms. And when there's family time, the phones are handed over. What we had in our household was we had a central docking station where at a certain time of night, and as the research said earlier, I talked about at least 2 hours before you want your kids to go to sleep, they dock their phone in the central docking charging station. It can even be a lockbox that you have at your house. And the phones go there, and woe betide the kids if they grab those phones before morning or a certain time when they can have them. Just have those rules in place right from the start, that they're off screen and they're doing other things, but make sure you have other things to fill their time with, whether it's hobbies or free play or helping out around the house with gardening, whatever else it might be, doing things with them together, going to the beach, getting them out in blue time or green time, those things that help getting them off their screens. But basically, the kids need to know that even when it comes to technology, that we are the parent. There's no other way around that. And handing over the phone means handing over the phone. And it's an addictive device, which I'll talk about more a little bit in this session, but I think in session 4 I go more into detail about technology and some of these issues around it and how to parent in that space more effectively. But 2 great questions. Let's get into our Managing Your Child's Mental Health Part 2. When Mission Australia in the 2022 survey, which I do every couple of years, asked the young people to explain the most important issues in Australia. Number 1 was the environment. 51% identified it as one of the most important issues in Australia, compared with 38% in 2021. Equity and discrimination, 35% identified it as one of the most important issues. Number 3, mental health. 33.9% identified it as one of the most important issues in Australia, as compared with 34% in 2021. These are 3 big issues that kids themselves rate as the most important issues in Australia right now. Kids can struggle with some range of issues as they grow up. Some of these common mental health related issues they experience include relationship problems, for example, family and peers, eating or body image issues, more particularly for our girls, but for some boys as well, bullying, including cyberbullying. It's a big one. That's another reason I want my kids off phones for some parts of their day, because cyberbullying is ever present with our kids. Abuse, physical, emotional or sexual, feeling sad or depressed, worry or anxiety, and self-harm or suicide. About 1 in 7 children and adolescents aged 4 to 17 have recently experienced a mental health disorder in Australia. That means it's got serious enough that it needs some form of intervention from the professionals. 1 in 7, which is quite a high number for our kids. What Jonathan Haidt says that factors normally associated with anxiety and depression, such as sugar, nicotine, drug abuse or violence, have all trended downwards since 2010. Things we think our kids often get involved with at-risk activities, he says they've all dropped off. They're not such an issue today as what they used to be in years gone by. But he says, while this is happening, after more than a decade of stability and improvement, the mental health of adolescents in many countries around the world deteriorated suddenly in early 2010. As I said in the previous presentation, he can almost identify the month when these all began to spiral out of control. Jean Twenge, who's researched this space as well, says every indicator of mental health and psychological well-being has become more negative across teens and young adults since 2012. The trends are stunning in their consistency, their breadth and size. What she says is across the board since 2010, anxiety, depression and loneliness have all increased, and it's not just the symptoms that rose, but also the behaviours, including emergency visits for self-harm and for suicide attempts in Australia, have all gone off the charts since the year 2010. What Twenge says, all these rapid changes in mental health coincide with the most rapid uptake in a new technology in human history, the incorporation of smartphones into our lives, which has allowed non-stop engagement. As I said earlier, this will take up all our attention for our children and for us if we let it. Walk down Pitt Street Mall, and now I need to play dodgem cars. I used to think that they, at the traffic lights, when the lights go beep, 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 beep for crossing, that was because, for me, who's deaf. No. They're there because too many people were walking out like lemmings on their phones. On a train, everyone's on their phone. And often now it's with headphones on, all those white pods, and everyone is tuning out, and discussion and talk and just passing the time of day with people has decreased significantly. When these were invented to connect, they've actually caused a disconnect. And society is now just waking up to the consequences of that for us, but especially for our children. Our children today are more likely to feel lonely than at any other time. You can see here about the year 2007-8, the iPhone gets released, but it's still not too bad. It starts to kick up, but it's the year 2010 when the smartphone is released and social media and front-facing cameras that loneliness kicks up for our kids. Less likely enough sleep. Once again, you can see that it tracks along and increases, but really shoots off the scale around the year 2010 to 2012, when again, unfettered access to technology becomes available. Twenge says, researchers found that teens who spend a lot of time in front of screen devices, playing computer games, using more social media, texting and video chatting, were less likely than those who invested time in non-screen activities like sports, reading newspapers and magazines and face-to-face social interaction. The happiest teens use digital media for less than an hour per day. But after a daily hour of screen time, unhappiness rises steadily along with increasing screen time. So there's a median here we need to negotiate with our kids where I say a good rule to put in place for parents is, and for our kids, is 1 hour on and 2 hours off. So you have that agreement in place. Yep, you can have an hour on, but then you got 2 hours off, preferably outdoors, doing things that are off-screen activities. Because of this very reason, that unhappiness rises steadily with increasing screen time. Twenge says, of course, that total screen abstinence doesn't lead to happiness either. So I don't think you just throw them in the bin. David Gillespie said he wished he could take all the devices and throw them in the bin, but we can't. We live in a technological age. This is the social capital. This is the good old cord phone of years gone by. This is how kids operate. And so total screen abstinence isn't the answer. The happiest teens use digital media a little less than an hour per day, but after a daily hour of screen time, the unhappiness rises steadily with increasing screen time. The researchers report today in the journal Emotion. The key to digital media use, according to Twenge, and happiness is limited use. Aim to spend no more than 2 hours a day on digital media. This is a good rule to put in place with our kids. And try to increase the amount of time you spend seeing friends, face-to-face, and exercising. 2 activities reliably linked to greater happiness. So that's a rule to try and put in place with ourselves, but also with our family and our children. 1 in 5 children under the age of 18 have a mental health disorder. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University found that teens who spend more than 3 hours per day on social media are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression, social withdrawal, and experience loneliness. So just by cutting that time down, we can't get them off screens, that's the way they live, but trying to cut the time down to 2 hours a day is helpful. But then I get told often, but my kids spend 8 hours a night doing homework. You try talking to most teachers, and they'll tell you that if they're doing homework for more than 1 hour a night involving screens, they're not doing homework. Our kids have become very good at having different apps open so that you come in the room and little Johnny is doing homework. But as soon as you leave the room, there's a game running in the background, often called Fortnite. They're having a conversation on Discord with some other mates. They have a calculator app, which is actually a vault to hide photos behind which you'll never see. And these apps have been created to take parents out of the equation. They even have communication so that they can tell their mates, parent in the room. It's a simple little 3 or 4 letters they type, parent in the room. So that everyone knows to leave Johnny alone, the parent's in their bedroom or wherever they're doing homework. or parent looking over shoulder. So they can let everyone know that the parent's there. When they go, they can then replay the game. This is why I say have the best mainframe computer that money can buy in a public space in your house, so that Johnny does the homework at the mainframe and you are wandering by doing things as a parent. You can see what's going on. And once the hour or 2 hours is up, sorry Johnny, but my teacher's going to yell at me. Well, blame your parent. I say to my kids, blame your dad. I'm happy to be the weird parent and wear the badge of honour that Dad said I couldn't do it after 2 hours online. And I've never got in trouble from school ever as a dad. It's okay to be the weird parent and get your kids say, blame me as a dad. And wear that as a badge of honour that you're helping your kids stay off screen. Research also finds when kids come across things that are distressing online, they've often seen pornography by the age of 11. Most likely, 90% of the cases have seen pornography, not just porn, but hard porn, if they have access to a device. But if you're able to encourage them to talk to you about it, which means that you've seen it with them online and they come across it by mistake, just having that discussion reduces the effects and the damage that those sorts of unsavoury things can do. That's why I've invested in the best that money can buy when it comes to mainframe, because kids gravitate to the most powerful and best device in the house. And that's worked most of the time for me. 1 in 5 children under the age of 18 have a mental health disorder. More kids are affected by mental illness than asthma, peanut allergies, diabetes and cancer combined. Yet we seem to worry about these ones more so than the mental illness. 2/3 of them will never get help due to the misinformation and stigma involved around it. Professor Sam Harvey of Black Dog Institute in Australia said depression has become more common in adolescents and young adults over the past decade. There are also worrying signs of an increase in depressive symptoms in children since the COVID-19 pandemic. Across a sample of Year 8 students in Australia, 15.1% reported clinically significant symptoms of depression, with proportions being significantly higher in girls, 19.1%, compared to boys, 7.6%. Jonathan Haidt in his book highlights that girls seem to suffer more from these sorts of things from screens than boys. He wrote that in his book last year. But since he's written his book, he says, I think girls are going to be okay. I'm now more worried about boys. Because girls tend to talk about it more, they tend to exhibit the symptoms and seek help. Boys mask the symptoms. And for boys, they're more likely to get addicted and involved in gaming than social media. Social media is more addictive for girls. But for boys now, to play the best games, they retreat to their bedrooms, they put on their headphones, they turn out the lights, and they more or less opt out of society. And they don't even know how to court, to woo, to fall in love with a girl anymore. It's just too hard for them. It's easier now for them to fall in love with an AI girl. And they can make this girl into their own image, who'll do what they want, who'll say what they want, and they actually have a relationship with an AI girlfriend because it's so much easier than trying to pursue a real girlfriend. And Jonathan Haidt says this is the big concern for our boys who are opting out of society and out of life completely, unless we as society intervene. Professor Sam Harvey says, a very worrying trend that the report also highlights is that further analysis showed that among depressed adolescents, girls were significantly more likely to engage in intentional self-harm than boys, although depressed boys and girls did not differ in likelihood of suicide ideation or suicide attempt. And that's just tragic when it ends up there. Maggie Dent. You have a young girl, teenage girl. This is an Australian book well worth getting from our bookstores on girlhood. She says, so what's happened in the past 10 to 12 years? Let's be honest. The world seems like a nastier place than it was when we were teenagers. 24/7 news cycle, often over-sensationalised, constantly reports on the negative side of humanity. Interesting for our girls. Teen girls I've spoken to recently tell me how they worry for the future, how deeply they are concerned about the wars in Ukraine, Middle East, the increasing incidence of natural disasters from floods, earthquakes and bushfires, and the impact of climate change. Here's the issue. The giant tech companies are unashamedly altering the landscape for our children and our adolescents. Once they discovered that individuals stay engaged online for longer, when they see negative content, they manipulated the algorithms to ensure that is what happens to every single one of us. In other words, they make money out of keeping our kids, in particular our girls, online with the negative news cycle, and then the effect it has on our girls escalates as they're online in this vicious cycle. This is David Gillespie, who I was talking about earlier. There was a long-term study of 10,000 children from every state between 1999 and 2000. They were born in those times, 1999 and 2000. This is my kids' ages. During our teenage years, he says, according to the study, we are most susceptible to mental health illness because of the teen brain. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 15 boys are likely to experience the symptoms of depression to a significant degree. About twice that number will experience symptoms of anxiety within any 12-month period. What they've found, according to studies, social media platforms exacerbate anxiety, depression, and even physical ailments. Only twice the rate of teen boys, 3 in 5 teenagers report girls feeling sad. Twice the rate of teen boys, 3 in 5 teenage girls report feeling sad or hopeless. 80% of teens use social media daily. Only 20% read a book for pleasure. Students constantly on social media will experience a short attention span, which can affect their study habits. There's a book written by Johann Hari that's still in a bookstore, it's a good seller, called Stolen Focus. It's well worth a read about how our attention spans are reducing thanks to screens and social media and short-form videos like TikTok and YouTube. David Gillespie says, unfettered access to screens is driving an epidemic of addiction, depression and anxiety, the likes of which we have never witnessed before. So, here's 7 ways to promote the positive mental health in your children. This is not just anxiety, this is mental health as a whole. Here are 7 ways. Number 1, be a good role model. How you handle your challenges and uncomfortable feelings influences how your children learns to respond to their own challenges. So just seeing what you do, how you put your screen down and walk away, but in general, how you handle the challenges in life makes a huge difference. Children need love, boundaries, and a role model to look up to. While there is no shortage of candidates from cartoon characters and athletes to teachers and peers, nothing comes close. And this is a big one. Nothing comes close to the power of an invested parent. And the best thing you can do for the mental health of your child is to fight and keep fighting for the right relationship with your child. Show grace to them and they'll show grace to you. And every day is a new day to redraw the lines and start all over again. I call it grace-based parenting. Just like God shows grace to us, show grace to your kids and grace to yourself as well, because parenting is not easy. And just being here today, but also being able to talk to each other about your challenges, your ups and downs, and how you manage screen time and other challenges is a good way to get through parenting together as well. This good book, Hold On to Your Kids, is again a great read. There is now more change in a decade than previous in a century. When circumstances change more quickly than our culture can adapt to, our customs and traditions disintegrate. It is not surprising that today's culture is failing its traditional function of supporting adult-child attachments. Part of rapid change has been electronic transmission of culture, allowing commercially blended and packaged culture to be broadcast into our homes, into the very minds of our children. Instant culture has replaced what used to be passed down through custom and tradition and from one generation to another. What Newfield and Mate are saying is we need to slow down, tell stories, read stories, have those slow meals where grandma is present and tells her life stories and the kids are bored, but at the same time they take it in. Have those times when you're in the parks doing picnics together with extended family, spending time together on holidays and beach days and other cultural days that you celebrate where the kids are required to be at. That's where customs and traditions and grounding and more well-rounded, healthy mentality is created. What they conclude by saying is the secret of parenting is not what a parent does, but rather who the parent is to a child. When a child seeks contact and closer with us, We become empowered as a nurturer, a comforter, a guide, a model, a teacher, or a coach. For a child well attached to us, we are her home base from which to venture into the world, her retreat to fall back to, her fountainhead of inspiration. And that comes with time. Excuse me. Children spell love as T-I-M-E. And it's the very thing the enemy goes after. In the day and age we live in the busy rat race of Sydney today. Maggie Dent also wrote a book on boys, From Boys to Men, well worth getting if you have young sons. She says the research shows conclusively the importance of significant, safe, adult allies who aren't parents. The people are called lighthouses. Think aunts, uncles, grandparents, coaches, a friend's parents, neighbours, grandparents, teachers, family friends, or community members. You often don't find these relationships online. It's offline, in those communities that we need to invest our kids in. It takes only one adult who can hold the light in a young person's life to make a significant difference to the life outcomes for that young person. The most important things that lighthouses bring are unconditional acceptance and unconditional positive regard. That's often not so much a parent, because you've got a parent, but an extra person to invest in your child's life in the shape of a mentor. Number 2, it goes about saying limit screen time. Limit screen time for your kids and for yourself. Every 1 hour on screen, 2 hours off screen, preferably outside. Also, when they are online, think about positive screen time, which is what we call good screen time. Use screens to connect with people, to learn things, set limits when and where, learn to switch to flight mode, leave screens out of bedrooms, track time spent on devices, conversation about screen time, and encourage your children to delete people who cause stress. This comes with conversation. So what we need to think about is, what are our kids consuming online? And is it passive or is it creative? If they're programming or learning coding, if they're making, building or creating or writing or reading, that's what we call positive screen time, as compared to scrolling, to gaming, to consuming, to social media. So if my child is engaged in positive screen time, I will let them be online for longer, because it's actually creating and growing and building, rather than what I call the junk food, which is consuming and passivity and negativity. So encouraging your child to have a good screen diet is part of positive mental health as well. Jean Twenge says, you want to take just one thing away from this, it should be this: no phones in the bedrooms overnight, and that's for kids, but also for adults. And she says, go out and buy an alarm clock. They're still available. Number 3, back off and let them struggle and fail forward. We as parents today want to rescue, want to hover, want to wrap in cotton wool. But hovering too closely limits your child's development by not letting them learn how to handle disappointments, make mistakes, and overcome struggles and failures. What the research has found is that if we allow our kids to struggle and fail in the little things that happen daily, it immunises them and prepares them for the bigger things that occur. It's almost like it prepares them to handle things better as they grow up. And so sometimes maintaining a non-anxious presence, maybe even suggesting some things they can do, but let them struggle and handle it themselves, is far better as a parent when it comes to mental health. Joe Prendergast says, try a bit of benign neglect. Leave the helicopter on the helipad. Support them, but don't do everything for them. Life skills are best learnt through experiences both negative and positive. Justin Colson says, the sense of competence and capability that our children experience when they push through something hard and achieve it is a powerful contributor to mental health. Competence is a basic psychological need, but when we limit our children's ability to develop personal competencies in relation to life skills, when they complain it's too hard and we acquiesce and help them, they miss the development and positive outcomes that such an activity creates. This is where Pathfinders comes into its own. The kids go out, they get stung by nettles, they get a bit cold, they might even burn their food or not cook it quite properly. They may get a little bit lost, but found again. They may realise next time they need to pack better for their hike. All those things prepare them for life. I think the Pathfinders are one of the best things we have on the planet when it comes to teaching our kids about life. And even more so is that often when they go hiking, they're out of range, so they can't be on these. And they're out in blue and out in green and out in nature away from urban noise, so all those positive effects kick in when we send our kids on a Pathfinder camp. Number 4, build connection and conversation. So important. Safety is not the absence of threat, it is the presence of connection, according to Gaber Mate. One of the most important factors in addressing toxic stress in children is healthy social connection. While a traumatic past may increase our risk of bad things happening, we are not destined to crash and burn. Adversity doesn't mean we are destroyed. We can rescue one another. The key is connection and mentoring relationships, both to us and to each other in peer group communities. Connection builders: play no phone time, shared hobbies, activities, physical touch, date your child. I found for my daughter and her mental health, when I saw that she was really suffering, it was, as a dad, factor in a date in the near future where just my daughter and myself. When I was across in the UK just last week for her wedding, one of the last things we did before she got married was to have one more father-daughter date. Just us. We'd done this since she was a baby, and so it wasn't weird for her. It was something she even asked for. She loves shopping. I hate shopping. But we did it for the connection that it brings. And we both cried this time because I knew it was one of the last times we get to do it because she's now living in the UK and I'm living over here. But time spent with your children is time never wasted. And as a dad, both of my son and my daughter, dating my child regularly filled her love cup, but also brought down the anxiety and the mental health issues and fostered connection like nothing else could. And now looking back, I value the times that we had. Number 5, monitor regular sleep, exercise and the great outdoors. Daron Morton talks about bright sun, especially in the morning. For just 10 minutes is enough to build resilience and mental health in our children. But also mountaintop or wilderness experience where you get out and climb that mountain or get out there in the bush and get lost and found again with your kids grows greater resilience and fosters good mental health. Research shows that teens are 55% less likely of a mental illness if they access green space with trees. Movement is a predictor of mental health and also boosts physical health and overall well-being. Kids are encouraged to get at least 1 hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day. However, less than 20% of Aussie kids are meeting that goal. Number 6, accentuate the positive. Look for your kids in what they are doing right. As parents, we tend to fall into the trap of being what I call naggers. And we yell for things that they haven't done rather than praising them for the things that they have done. And so, as a parent, try hard, very hard, to find 5 positives for every negative. I like the way you helped your brother. I like the way you made your bed. I like the way that you helped me without even asking today with the dishes, or I love your positive attitude today. Just find things to praise them for and do it daily. And then the one negative. Please try and remember to pick up your socks and put them in the laundry, whatever it might be. But also, don't let them be too hard on themselves. They're their own worst critics. That inner voice that they have can get very nasty at times. So speaking the positive into them helps them to create that positive self-talk as well, which is so important when it comes to mental health. Foster gratitude. Gratitude fosters a release of happy hormones like serotonin and dopamine and grows the gratitude part of the brain. So a daily gratitude challenge for your kids. Ask them, maybe it's going to be a bedtime ritual. What did you see that was beautiful today? Who has done something recently for you that you are grateful for? And what are you better at today than you were a year ago? Asking these questions helps grow the gratitude factor in your kids, and it becomes learnt and becomes wired, becomes ingrained as a teen, so they're more likely to be positive as a young adult and in life itself. And encouragement of that self-talk works wonders with their mental health. Number 7, finally, immerse them in creative arts. I found this one surprising. When I look at my life growing up, I can see what a difference it made. It doesn't matter what it is. Help them find time for creative arts. So often we want them to learn their maths and their English and geography and history and physics and all those things. Yes, they're important. But somehow creative arts has fallen off the radar when it comes to learning. But it's so important when it comes to mental health. James Clear says, creating art, whether it's a musical instrument, painting, building, creating, whatever it is, but creating art decreases negative emotions, reduces stress and anxiety, and improves medical outcomes. Not only can being creative help you live longer, but it can improve your quality of health and life too. Create more time than you consume. The moral of the story is that the process of making art, whether that be writing, painting, singing, dancing, or anything in between, is good for you. Creativity is suffering in a consumer-driven digital world. The power of the instant and FOMO, fear of missing out, and endless hours of children doing exactly the same things with the screen on their lap. Create flow. Flow state is when you are really absorbed in something you enjoy and time flies. It improves mood and emotion. I'm sure you can think back to when you're in that flow state. When time just flew, you enjoy what you were doing and you felt like you were in that moment and nothing else mattered. And often when you think back, you were doing something creative. Physical activity and the creative arts are two great ways to create that flow state. In conclusion, Adele Diamond, who is a professor of neuroscience at the University of British Columbia, says academic achievement, social and emotional competence, physical, mental and spiritual are fundamentally and multiply interrelated. The best way to foster any of these is to foster all of them and grow great kids in the process. In conclusion, if you're worried about your child, seek help. Start with your school counsellor, but also things like Kids Helpline, Lifeline, Parent Line, Headspace, Sane Australia, etc., Beyond Blue, Head to Health, great resources you can turn to get professional advice if you're particularly worried about your child and their mental health. And that's it for today. So thank you very much. I think our time's... Yep, look at that, finished right on time.
Wow. Thank you so much for Pastor Daron. Very informative and very useful information that is really applied to our next generation. We don't know what they are suffering, but we can see it, and that's how important we need to learn first as a parents and then support them and to understand them. So this great seminar will be happening again in 2 weeks' time. So it will be on 30th of August.
Yeah, my apologies. Next week we have End It Now rally. So you want to come across to Mountain View, we're doing a conference-wide End It Now rally, which takes me out of here and over there.
Cool. All right, but if we can't join you next week, you'll come to us.
Yes, week after I'm here.
Yes, great. So make sure you bring your friends or whoever you might feel they will benefit from this kind of talk. Come along, and we do have Pathfinder Adventures happening in the same afternoon, so the kids can go to either Pathfinder Adventures to enjoy their time. And
September 6th.
Hey?
September 6th.
And also, there are 4 sections, right, in total. Yep. So after next one, we still have 2 more to go. So we'll announce the the day and time, but the next one will be 30th of August, 1:30 sharp. Okay, all right. And now we're going to invite our own church pastor to give us a prayer, so Pastor Daron can have a bit of rest for his voice.
Okay, let's pray. 我们一起来祷告。Our Father in heaven, thank you very much for the very beautiful and valuable afternoon that our parents can spend time together to learn, and also from Pastor Daron Pratt. Thank you so much for the information. Help us, Father, to apply all this knowledge that we have learned today in our family, in our home, and also especially to our children and our teenagers. There are many challenges, and also there are many difficulties that we face, but we pray that God give us wisdom, and also most importantly, may God help us to have your love in our heart so that we can connect and love our children, and also to lead them and guide them. And bless us as we are going to conclude our seminar this afternoon. May your angels protect us to go home safely. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
So thank you, everyone. So we still have a few minutes you can hang around. Otherwise, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.